So one common theme in a lot of the questions about the Churchland and Churchland reading centered on the idea of ignorance, or sort of what do we know, how much do we know about consciousness? Can we really say certain things about consciousness depending on how little we know about things? So this question notes like how can they make the argument after conceding ignorance? It's possible that certain things constitute cognition and those are biological, or this question, we don't have any laws or basic understanding yet to claim certain things about consciousness, or this question, if we know there's a greater understanding in the near future, should we really recommend to use the fact that it's unknown as part of the argument for accepting or rejecting it? This question, they're sort of being overly optimistic, how in the future we're going to solve all this brain stuff because right now we haven't solved anything. This question, this is pure speculation, like we don't know that we're going to be able to program AI like this. Yeah, so these are sort of common responses to Churchland and Churchland. So Churchland and Churchland say, look, people think that AI can't be conscious, or Searle thinks that AI can't be conscious because he thinks about the Chinese room and he says no consciousness there. But you can't really like imagine these things because look, you might think that light can't be just electromagnetic waves because you imagine somebody, shaking a magnet and there's no light. But maybe if you shake the magnet really fast, you do get light. We know that's how it happens. And so maybe if you just build a really good robot, it would be conscious. Maybe that's how that happens. And so it is very speculative. It is based on stuff we don't know a lot about. But if you think back to the first Churchland article we read, not in this unit, but much earlier, the Hornswoggle problem, which was also about consciousness and also about what we don't know. Her point in that article was, look, from the fact that we don't know anything, what can you conclude? Basically nothing. There's almost nothing interesting you can do about the fact that we don't know something. And so in this particular case, she would say, it's true, we sort of don't know exactly where consciousness comes from. We don't know exactly how the brain produces consciousness. But look, why should we be skeptical that something other than a squishy human brain can produce consciousness? Why would we be skeptical that the AI can produce consciousness? Searle's argument is that, oh, we should be skeptical because it's sort of obvious that it wouldn't produce consciousness. It's just like, clearly the person in the Chinese room doesn't understand, so clearly the computer wouldn't understand. And the Churchland's point in the Churchland and Churchland article is, I don't know, sometimes things that seem clear turn out to be wrong. So it seems that clearly shaking a magnet isn't going to get you light, but turns out that's false. If you shake it fast enough, you get light. You think it's clear that just building a robot isn't going to get you consciousness? You could turn out to be wrong. You could build a robot and it could be conscious. So what reason do you have to be skeptical? And their suggestion is, well, there's actually no reason to be skeptical. So on the one hand, they're kind of optimistic, but you might think Searle is overly pessimistic. He doesn't have sort of any reason backing up his pessimism, according to Churchland and Churchland. And if you don't have a reason backing up your pessimism, if you just say, oh, it doesn't seem to me like they could be conscious, then Churchland and Churchland are saying, no, you can't really draw that conclusion. Why? Well, partially for the reason we saw in the earlier Churchland, which is that you can't draw conclusions from ignorance generally. It would maybe be different if there were something extra Searle had to say. And you might think some of the stuff he says about biology goes a little bit extra. So he doesn't just say, oh, we don't know how consciousness works, so robots can't be conscious. He does say, it seems like consciousness is produced by the brain, and so you'd need to have a brain, and the robot won't have a brain. And so potentially that's a sort of response to Churchland and Churchland. You would say, okay, well, we don't understand many things, but we do know it comes from the brain. And then the Churchland and Churchland response is, well, what are you saying comes from the brain? What is it that you're convinced the brain can make that other things can't make? Is it the ability to sort of interpret vision? Well, we can build robots that can see things. Is it the ability to speak, to have a conversation? Well, look, even the Chinese room example shows we can build a robot that has a conversation. Is it something else? Whatever it is, it seems like we can probably build a robot that does it. So unless you can explain what this further thing, this consciousness thing is, unless there's something special there, why can't a robot have it? That's the sort of back and forth. The conversation doesn't have to end there. There's sort of more steps. But that's the sort of main back and forth that we have just based on the Churchland and the Searle reading. And so that's maybe sort of the first steps in the conversation when it comes to skepticism and optimism and ignorance and these sort of questions.